Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here. Before we get into our podcast, just want to do a quick shout out for Inspection Manager. What an amazing inspection app platform that they have. And they're really excited at the moment with their tenant assisted routine inspections, where your tenants, in the convenience of their own time frame and in the convenience of their rental property, they can be getting you through the app inspections, their own inspection or their own photos that they've done. Now, this is going to help you, particularly if you're in lockdown. But what we've also found as businesses have come out of lockdown, they've found that perhaps they can do maybe one or even two of these inspections a year, aside from scheduling their normal routine inspections. The next step, really go and have a demo, have a look for yourself and make a decision where this could actually work for you too. So go to inspectionmanager.com, request a demo and check it out. Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here from the PM Power podcast show. Really important podcast we got on today with property manager safety. And I just want to welcome Jody Chatillon. Did I say that right?
It's close enough. Jody Chatillon, yep.
Chatillon. And Jody, you've got 20 years property management experience. That's more than me. Well done. And Jody is with Remax in Nambour in Queensland. Now, Jody, when we were talking about, doing podcasts and what topic are we going to cover, you were really insistent on property manager safety. I thought, great topic, but why did you pick that one?
Absolutely, Darren. Look, through my years of experience as a property manager, obviously we all hear the horror stories of things that have happened through our industry. But even for myself, I've come across situations where I've been left feeling uncomfortable. I've actually walked into a house, there was a stalker there, squatting in the house. So, it highlighted to me that, even with really great preparedness, that sometimes things happen and it captures you off guard. So it's important to discuss things like this. And I think it's really important that we continue to retrain and rethink and reapproach these sorts of topics because they're really relevant.
I agree. And let's just frame up the podcast and the seriousness of this because, we can't deny the deaths that have occurred to the people in the real estate industry. And we just very briefly and very respectfully just touch on them. We don't want to get into too deep because there's still a lot of pain involved and there's families and all of those sort of things. But several years ago in New Zealand, we had two property managers who were shot. In around about 2006, 2007 in Brisbane, a property manager was shot and killed. Of course, our property managers in New Zealand were killed. We've had about 10 years before the Brisbane incident in Sydney, there was a property manager that was knifed and killed in an office. And these are just the tips of the iceberg because that doesn't talk about the property managers that have been assaulted and compromised. And then the amount of property managers that have been scared or an issue or something's gone on. So it's like a pyramid. And this is a very serious issue. And particularly when, certainly in Australia, and I reckon I can comfortably speak for New Zealand as well, when 90 to 95% of property managers and staff are female, I think this is a very relevant topic that we need to talk about because it is very, very serious. And I just want to start off with a story that a lady that I came across probably over about 10 years ago, she told me this story. This happened to her. She was in Melbourne, property managing. She was driving along a road and going to a routine inspection, and that little small voice, woman's intuition kicked in and said, don't go to that property. So her woman's intuition was kicking in, don't go to the next routine inspection that she was driving to. She actually listened to the voice, drove past the property, then thought she's being ridiculous, turned around, went back, walking down to the property, knocking on the door. A very agitated, aggressive tenant opened the door, when in a very short period of time put a hunting knife to her throat. She was able to back up out of the situation. She was able to escape. When she called the office, she was so traumatized, she couldn't even get out the address. And one thing that's really important here for everyone to understand, when we're in fear, our critical brain shuts down. Our thinking side of our brain shuts down. It's frozen. And so we may act in a certain way when we're in a completely compromised situation than if we're out of that. Of course, she was traumatized. Eventually, her work found out where she was. She was off for a number of months, and then she came back to property management, albeit very, very slowly. So that really is highlighting what this podcast is all about. This is all about keeping property managers safe. It's a very serious discussion, and I think if your boss isn't listening to this, they should be. Perhaps forward them the podcast. And so let's just get things underway, and let's talk about what are some of the proactive things, Jody, that we can be doing in property management. Let's talk about some of those things that we can be doing to avoid and be proactive to actually not step into compromising safety situations.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as property managers and assistant property managers and business development managers, it is a large portion of our job where we are out amongst the public, whether they're owners that we're meeting, whether they are tenants that we're meeting, prospective clients, even tradespeople. So I think it's really important that our business leaders have really important conversations with staff about accountability, about where are you going? Have you put your diary notes in? I mean, I know, long gone are the days where we write our appointments in a manual diary, but in this day and age, we all connect with shared calendars, and we connect to our mobile phone devices to say where we are and so forth. So I think it's important that we're using those systems to say where we are. Our scheduled appointments are clear, and even obviously we have programs that track who we're meeting, their contact details, their email addresses. We can go back to basics and have our code words with our staff. I remember going to a rental property, and I went around the back and the door was ajar, and it just didn't feel right to me. And I called my office receptionist, and we had a code word system. And so I was able to say that to her. I told her where I was, and she knew to just hang on the line. And so then as I've gone through the home, I've been able to come back to her and said, no, look, everything's fine. Obviously, the cleaner left the door unlocked. But it was important to have that system, because if something had gone wrong, she would know exactly where I was, that I was concerned. And then if something was going to happen, she would have heard that as well, and the police would have been called straight away.
So let's just take a step back, because I think there's a lot of points there I think we need to pull apart a bit more and explore a bit more. So, firstly, ladies have a radar, and, it needs to be listened to. And and, if you want to accuse me of being sexist, that's fine, but I think we're talking the truth here. And, I think we talked about in our planning session for this podcast, Jody, about feeling uncomfortable. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Listen to why you're feeling uncomfortable. And I made a mention to you when I was managing staff once. I had a rule with them: if they were turning up to a routine inspection and simply felt uncomfortable enough that they didn't want to go in, they ought to walk away, even if they have no reason. And if I get a complaint, I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
You mentioned you had concerns around that people should be allowed to feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And as you say, intuition, a lot of people are very much guided by that, and it is important, particularly, now in the climate that we're seeing, where people are struggling for money, because of loss of jobs or illness, or, lots and lots of varied cases. People are put into really hard situations, and it makes people do very odd things and things that are out of character. So, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right, and you do need to listen to that.
Yeah, and I think you do. And I think, there's a bit of an ongoing joke that I throw out there when I do training. And of course, with COVID, I haven't done any live training for a while in a seminar, but I put out there, okay, let's say I got a room of 50 property managers in front of me, and I say, okay, hands up, ladies, if you've ever gone to a routine inspection and a male person answers the door in just a towel, and these sniggers just go out through the room and chuckles and, oh yeah, me, and then and all these hands go up, and I said, all right, guys, and there are usually some guys in the room, okay, how many guys here has that happened to, with a guy coming to the door in a towel? And no one puts their hand up.
Yeah,
it says a lot. that you've got male tenants out there obviously looking to get lucky or whatever, but it's a creepy situation for ladies because the overwhelming majority of ladies don't find that sort of thing welcome. And, you know, you either got to take charge of the situation, say, look, Mr. Tenant, I'm here to do a routine inspection, put your clothes on, or otherwise I have to go. But certainly being able to simply walk away if they're feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason, knowing that management will back them up if there's a complaint.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is about knowing that your manager has your back. And it's about setting your own set of boundary rules as well, because again, personal safety is absolutely a personal thing. And so you know where your limits are, you know what you are comfortable with, and you know your own personal background as well.
Now, you talked about the secret code, and, you know, I hear a lot of people at training, not a lot, maybe some talk about having a Cobweb, but a lot don't. Look, quite frankly, in most offices, if a property manager suddenly disappeared, no one knew where they went, there may be an address in the diary, possibly not. But the point is, it's unlikely, it could be unlikely that you know where that person is.
Absolutely.
And there's no policies or procedures in place. Only a few offices have that sort of thing and take this. So it's a very serious and risky situation. And nothing happens, but if it does, that's where people, you know, come unstuck. So let's talk about routine inspections. And, you know, I think property managers don't park in the driveway. Don't park in a driveway where someone can then park behind you and block your exit. You've always got to be making sure that you have exits. And what are some other tips, Jody, at routine inspections with safety?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the great thing about the modern world in property management is that we're usually using trust accounting programs that do, or apps that do our inspection scheduling. So the great thing is that that's really transparent. And I can see myself, I can see when my assistant is out doing routines and what property she's been to and what's next. So that's really awesome. But it's important while you're there, one, to be aware, do they have pets? Because you're not necessarily just at risk of injury from a person, but you're also at risk of injury from an animal. So just to throw that into the mix, Darren. So I think it's about being conscious of that. It's being conscious of certainly not parking in the driveway at a routine or an open home for that matter. And just being aware of those surrounds. So when you walk in and something doesn't quite seem right, there seems to have been a massive change in the way the property is perhaps presented, particularly if this is a longer term tenant. You know, is there a new smell that doesn't seem right? You know, I think there are a lot of alarm bells. You know, if you go to a property that's always immaculate and this time you've gone there and there's trash everywhere and, you know, maybe there's signs of drugs, again, another topic, but I think they're all things that we need to look at. And again, you know, you get the sob story if a tenant is home, if they're having some mental health issues or some financial issues, they're going to say some things that you should be alarmed at, conscious of, and I think given an opportunity to close that conversation and get out.
You talk about, you better have your wits about you, have your radar on, always.
There's so many things.
Yeah, always be on the lookout and looking at, you know, trying to not step into a sticky situation. So if you've got a creepy guy at the door or you feel uncomfortable, maybe this person's starting to follow you around, you need to make sure you know where your exits are as well. But I think, you know, if you get out, of course, you want to get out of that situation, but just flag that situation, then make sure you take a second person with you for every inspection after that. So you may have 3 or 4 inspections where you've got to go in pairs and you do all those inspections on the same day. You know, go and get some burly person from the office, you know, or a second, you know, colleague or whatever, but start doing them in pairs. But just don't compromise your safety. The amount of fees that you get, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it for your job. Your safety is number one.
Absolutely. And Darren, you said just before, you know, about tenants perhaps following you around at the inspection. that isn't necessarily uncommon. And again, just being socially aware of perhaps who you're dealing with, there are ways to manage that. For example, don't let them follow you into the bedroom. Have the door open and say, oh, after you. So you are behind them so that they're not restricting your ability to get out of that room.
Yeah.
Again, it's just something to be aware of. Hopefully it's not an issue for you, but there are ways to manage those incidences.
And it comes down to, how do you feel? Are you comfortable? Are you uncomfortable? You've really got to listen to that. And again, ladies have a really good radar for that sort of thing, and you just got to listen to it. Okay, moving on, let's talk about open inspections. And so we're not talking about routines, we're talking about showing prospective tenants through. Hopefully we've got a name and a phone number, and more than that if we have, with an application already logged, so you've got some type of contact information or details or whatever, should something happen, that you can hand to the police. But this brings out a death that happened in Melbourne a number of years ago with a real estate sales agent, to do with an open inspection. I'm not going to go any more details on that, but it does again highlight the issues. And there was another story I heard of a property manager that was showing several properties to one particular prospective tenant, and one of those properties, showing him through, she was very uneasy. He then went at her. She locked herself in the bathroom, and I don't know whether she had her phone or not, or the reception couldn't, but she just could not get out or make a call. The guy was just circling inside the property, the empty property, and she realized, she just waited for, I think it was a couple of hours before he left, before she was able to get out of the locked bathroom and make her escape. She had the details. Police went round to see the guy, and he had her picture up all where he was living. So she was targeted. And every now and again, you're going to get creepy situations that you've just got to watch. So, what are some tips, Jody, when we're doing open inspections? What are the things we can be looking out for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's early, and I hope we're all doing this, is turning up to the property early. It is difficult sometimes, unfortunately, because we often get to houses and there are already people half an hour early waiting there. But make a conscious effort to get as many doors open. I think quite often we have more than just the front and the back door. There might be a sliding door in the laundry. Even put the garage door up. If you're in a position where you might be feeling trapped or pressured to be in a certain location, it's important to be able to have options to get out if you need. So I think that would be tip number one. Tip number two, obviously making sure that we've got everybody's contact details. I actually like to stand at the front door. Some property managers prefer to be perhaps in an open space in a dining room, just depending on the configuration of the house. But I don't have an issue with standing at the front door, making sure that everybody's registered as they come in, giving them the little introduction on locations of rooms, etc. Feel free to have a walk through the home. A little bit different if it's a tenanted property, because obviously we have to be conscious of belongings in a property and so forth. But I think, again, just being aware of the spaces of your exits, and not standing in little corners where you could certainly be backed into, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think, that story that I had really highlights the concern there. And I think in this day and age, we've got to know who we're actually meeting. And
absolutely.
I think quite where we can be insisting, and obviously we've got issues around COVID and all those sort of things now as well that we've got to manage. And enough said, there's a lot to be said also about using virtual tours. And allowing tenants to be able to show themselves through online, and therefore you're only dealing with a minimal amount of people when it comes to the actual show through. Just go to virtualtourscreator.com.au. Tom there has got some great technology with virtual tours. You can do it on your iPhone. You don't need an expensive camera, but just go and you talk to Tom there. But I mean, that there, you should be cutting down a lot of unneeded showing people through, and deal with only the hot qualified tenants. But let's talk about, the obvious situation. And I know in most offices, if a property manager went out anywhere and suddenly disappeared, most of the people wouldn't know what to do or where to look. They may find in a calendar, there may be an address. Hopefully they've been to there. It might have been somewhere else. It might have been a tenant calling up and saying, hey, look, by the way, can I just see you? And they suddenly shoot over to another property that's not in the diary, because the diary isn't always accurate with everything that you do.
Yeah.
How are people going to know where to find you? So in this day and age, this wonderful day and age of technology, there are some things that we can be doing. Now, firstly, let's talk about apps and alert apps. Now, you've got the Daniel Morecambe app, which is called Help Me, and you can download that. A lot of people talk about that, and you can get free access to that, I believe. But also, you talked about a property management software platform, Property Me. What's on that?
Yeah, so on Property Me, up in the top right corner of the app, there is actually a button that you can press, and it's like a distress button. So you can press that, and it says, do you want to call back to your emergency contact? So it will then call the office or whoever you've got set up. Office, to me, setting up for the office makes sense. It makes sense because there's usually always somebody actually in the office. Whereas, if I put in my husband, he's likely not to answer the phone if he's at work. So you need to find someone who's going to be reliable. So that's really important. There are, a number of apps that you can use, that you can subscribe to. Some are free, some are not. Even just having, an in case of emergency contact in your mobile that you can quickly access. If you need to, they're all good systems to use, and I think it's just important that we use something. Something is better than nothing.
So alert apps we're alert, and we can actually make that. And look, I'm not sure if property managers carry around inspection apps on their phone. It may be on their iPad, and if their iPad's in the car and they're showing people through, well, you can't access that alert button on your iPad. And so really we need to have the alert apps for sure, but sometimes we may not be able to use it. And if we suddenly disappear, this is where tracking apps come in. And there are tracking devices now certainly available through Apple. They're like a little disc but they have to be in Bluetooth to a phone or something like that. They don't just track on their own. But the one that a lot of people use, and if you've got an iPhone, of course, you've got Find My iPhone app. Now, that means you would have to give your username and password, which is very sensitive and very private. I get that, to management, possibly with a negotiation agreement that can only be used in the case of an emergency like what we're talking about. People go, oh, but that's my privacy. Well, how important is your life? And so, we've got to weigh up our privacy and our safety. And I think common sense prevails here. And I'm personally not sure what you'd use on an Android phone. I'm sure there's similar programs available, but you need to be found. If something happened to you and you couldn't alert somebody, you still need to be found. And Find My iPhone is, I remember my bag got stolen once out of a car, and I was able to track my computer through Find My iPhone app. I got the police chased these people. They dropped the goods. I got them back the next day. But these tracking devices are freely available. And really, whether a tracker goes onto your car, if you've got a work car, all of those sort of things, we need to be safety conscious, when it comes to this sort of thing.
Absolutely. I would absolutely encourage any of my staff, and I know personally I take this stance, is I don't go into a property without at least, I have two mobiles, but I don't go anywhere into a rental property without my mobile, always. Because even if you're in, I remember doing a routine inspection going back a few months ago, and I do have my Property Me app on my phone, but the dog was there and it was barking, and it was in its own little fenced off area, and it was fine. But by the time I got into the house, it was really upset. And I kind of looked at it through the laundry door, and I thought, if it works out that it can get in through that pet flap that looks unlocked, I'm in a whole world of trouble. So I fast got out of there. But, should it have stuck its head in and got in, then I was going to have to lock myself into a room. And if I didn't have my phone, how was I going to make contact to anybody, the tenant, the office, my boss? So I don't go anywhere without my mobile phone. They're pretty easy to carry for the sake of safety.
If I can just jump in there, I mean, property managers with routine inspections, you should be sending a text out to tenants beforehand, confirming on what basis, if you are going to enter with keys, if that's your legislation permits that. Also, any pets need to be secured. There's all those sort of things and expectations up front that we should be doing at all times to minimize these particular type of issues. And try and avoid proactively these type of issues that we're talking about. Proactive is so much better than reactive, people. Keeping out of a situation and keeping yourself out of trouble is so much easier than trying to get yourself out of trouble. All right, let's just now let's talk about in office. Let's talk about in office safety. Because we do have angry people coming in. We do have all sorts of people coming in. Jody, perhaps what are some tips there that we could be doing in office for safety?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously there are the obvious things like front reception cameras and so forth, and not every business is able to do that. But I think, the common sense approach of having open conversations with clients, with your reception staff, that if you have got a client who perhaps you're expecting to come in that is unhappy about perhaps a bond dispute, that you prep them, make them aware that this person is going to come in and that they're likely not going to be happy, and that you're going to come out and address them and then remove that situation from the front desk. So that we take them perhaps to an office, to a boardroom, and again, having that conversation with them about if this conversation goes down this track, or if this is starting to sound a little bit too concerning, to get a senior team member to duck in and make sure that everything is okay. And, I guess consciously listen. It's really important for all staff, sales, managers, reception, just to be consciously aware of some of the conversations that happen between us as staff and the clients that come in, because again, there would definitely be, warning signs and so forth. I remember having a gentleman come in quite a few years ago to our reception, and he wasn't dangerous, but he was very frustrated by his own disability. So he was actually hearing impaired. And he really struggled to get his message across, and then miraculously we find our receptionist actually knew some very basic sign language, so we could fast overcome that, but that's not a luxury that everybody has. So again, just being aware of people's social abilities and the way that they communicate, I think sometimes can minimize the stress that's experienced at that front desk.
Well, one of the best ways, if you're dealing with an aggressive, angry person because they're upset, we've got to bring that temperature down, because you can't talk about a situation when there's emotion involved. So we've got to bring the temperature down quickly. And I think very quickly, the two things to be able to do that is actively listening. You talked about that, actively listening, but also showing that you care.
Yeah.
Listening very carefully to what their complaint is, and you can verbalize back, look, if I can just repeat how I understand it, blah, 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 blah. But you need to make sure your understanding is exactly what the issue is according to what they've said. Make sure you care, make sure you do lots of listening, and before you know it, the temperature is coming right down to a point where you can actually have a conversation and then work to action and a solution. And I think sometimes it doesn't work because if the tenant's about to be evicted because they haven't paid their rent, well, there's things that can't be fixed as well. That, we've got to be very smart, even with evictions, talking about safety, making sure that if we have to go, we're going with someone from the office. It could be the boss or whatever, to make sure that we're prepped. If we feel that we could have a compromising situation, getting the police involved, and if the police are aware that there could be a compromising situation, then I'm sure that they will be happy to attend to keep the peace. And we've got those sort of actions that we can do as well. So, well, up, Jody, there's a lot of good information there. If people want to reach out to you and have a chat about anything to do with what we've talked about, Jody, what's the best way that people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm happy to speak to people on the phone or to email, maybe email initially. So my email address is renting@remax.com.au. And I'd love to chat to fellow property managers about their experiences, and, coming up with some problem-solving solutions that perhaps we can put forward, and train more on. I think as we continue to see more property managers come into the industry, it's so important that we keep bringing this topic up and readdressing it, and re-acknowledging it, because as you said earlier, unfortunately, when situations like this do arise, that sometimes we don't think as well as we ordinarily would, and I think the more you do talk about it and the more conscious you are about it, that if you unfortunately do become in a compromising situation, that you may be a little bit better prepared.
Yep, well done. Well, good chat. And renting@remax.com.au, those email addresses don't get any easier than that.
How fortunate am I?
Well done. So thank you so much, Jody. You really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience for people just like you out there in property management. Very useful information there. And a big thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And take care, everyone. Thank you.